Hey, what's up folks? How's it going? This is Waj. Hope you guys are all doing well. And in this video, we're going to be doing a full review for the Parrot Bebop 2. Now, this is obviously a replacement for the original Bebop drone that came out last year. We did a couple of videos on that, and it was more a hit and miss product. Had lots of quirks to it, and this Bebop 2 promises to kind of fix some of the issues that the original Bebop had some issues with. And in a lot of ways, this new version is quite a lot better than the original. It has better overall build materials, is put together in a better overall fashion, has much improved battery life, but there's also many issues with the drone itself, making it not the most perfect and ideal drone, especially right now in this competitive landscape of people buying all these flying camera platforms. So what we're going to do is do a full review. We're going to talk about the good and the bad and everything you need to know to determine if this thing is right for you. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Now, the essential design of the Bebop 2 is pretty much very similar to the original Bebop, although it has a slightly larger overall footprint. You can also see that the feet are also angled outwards in order to maintain a more stable landing. Now, in terms of build materials, most of the construction is comprised of a reinforced fiberglass, so it's pretty darn durable and certainly can take a beating as long as you avoid the front element of the lens, which is still part of one of the biggest problems of this overall design. Because the camera is at the front of the unit, it's highly vulnerable to any kind of collisions from a front end standpoint, or even if it nosedives down onto the ground, you're pretty much going to destroy this camera. And many people had these kind of issues with the original Bebop, and this new version isn't really going to solve that problem. Now, the rear visibility has been definitely improved. There's a large red LED, which does make the drone a little bit more noticeable, especially when you're looking at it from behind. But in most circumstances, you're going to be looking at the drone from the bottom, and there's no real LED lights to give you any kind of physical indication of how far away it is and what the exact orientation is. Now, one major improvement is definitely regarding the battery performance and even the battery design itself. It's much more better thought out compared to the original Bebop, which you had to manually plug in a power cable to the battery itself, and you had to actually use some Velcro straps to actually strap it down to the drone itself, which is kind of ghetto. Whereas on the Bebop 2, everything is integrated really nice. The installing the battery is not a problem whatsoever, and it actually fits into the drone properly this time. And of course, when we're talking about the battery life itself, there's a huge major upgrade in terms of the capacity and size of the battery. You're looking at 2700 milliamp hours versus the original Bebop had a 1200 milliamp hour battery, which gave you a flight time of roughly about 10 minutes, in most circumstances under that time. And of course, battery life depends upon how you're actually flying the drone. Based on my personal experience with the Bebop 2, I got easily over 20 minutes on average, and if you're more aggressive with it, you could get under 20 minutes, but it's definitely guaranteed in most circumstances that the battery performance is going to be a lot better and significantly more useful than what we had on the original drone. Now, in terms of the flight dynamics and performance, the Bebop 2 is quite a capable little drone. It can travel up to 16 meters per second horizontally, and it has a ascent speed of about 6 meters per second. Furthermore, you have a slew of different sensors that will enhance the stability of the drone, including an optical flow and ultrasound sensor, as well as gyroscopes and GPS, so you have a very stable overall hover. Now, since the Bebop 2 is quite light, weighing just about 500 grams, a strong gust of wind can knock it off course, but in calm weather conditions, the Bebop 2 is fairly stable and can hover at a fairly consistent pace with minimal deviations. Of course, there are a couple of ways to control the drone. One is, of course, through the application, which is compatible with both iOS devices as well as Android devices, of course, with a phone or tablet. Now, I personally had some issues with the Wi-Fi dropping off after about 150 to 200 meters. It is rated to about 300 meters with the built-in Wi-Fi of the drone itself, but I would highly recommend, if somebody's seriously interested in getting one of these, to definitely get one with the Sky controller, because it enhances the capabilities of the drone significantly. Not only do you get a much better range, you can get up to 2 kilometers, but the actual real physical controls is an asset and something that you'll feel a lot more comfortable flying with. Now, the controller is comprised mainly of 2 analog thumbsticks, which again you can kind of customize within software of the responsiveness and the functionality of what those thumbsticks do. Of course, have a joystick that will allow you to control the angle and vantage point of the camera itself. And on top of that, you have dedicated controls for things like return to home, landing and takeoff buttons, as well as a couple of different LED indicators indicators that will give you some information on the signal strength between the Sky controller and the drone. There's a red LED that'll tell you if you're recording video or not, as well as on the right hand side you have status LEDs for the battery life of both the controller and the drone. In addition to that, you also have a full-size HDMI connection that will allow you to output your video feed to an external monitor, or you can even record it if you want. And of course, you can use some video goggles to get some FPV perspective on your drone. Now moving forward, when it comes to capturing video and images, the Bebop 2 takes a different approach compared to most traditional drones. Most drones in this category use a separate camera that's stabilized within a 3-axis gimbal. Here, the Bebop 2 has an ultra-wide angle 180-degree fisheye lens that captures a very broad landscape, and it basically has a 1080p screen that within software you basically see a specific portion of. Now the software most of the time does a pretty okay job in terms of delivering some smooth looking footage, but at extreme angles you can definitely see the software kind of working and struggling to maintain a stable picture, but you can even see some artifacting and the blank spaces of the software trying to struggle in keeping that shot as stable as possible, and it definitely detracts from the video quality of what this thing can do. Now, in terms of actual camera specs, basically you have a 14 megapixel sensor that can shoot stills at that resolution, and the video quality is at 1080p at 30 FPS, and the actual quality of the video and photos itself are not that great. In most regard, you're looking at kind of pixelated. Sometimes if you're looking at straight at the sun, it can kind of trip up the autofocusing system and you kind of get an unfocused, blurry shot, as you can see over here. And in other times, even when the settings are correct, you're not going to see a lot of fine detail, mainly because you're kind of cropping down from a larger overall image, and the downsampling effect definitely produces a very low bit rate, which is understandable if you're going to share this through your phone and online and everything. But if you want to get anything that looks decent in terms of an aerial standpoint, you're going to really not be satisfied with the camera performance over here. Now, to sum up everything we talked about in this review, let's do a pros and cons list to determine the worth of this thing. So we'll start with the things that I did like about the Bebop 2. Now, firstly, it's a very compact and portable overall design compared to many of the drones in its category. You can actually fit this into a larger overall carry bag, and if you don't have the Sky controller, it's a pretty portable little platform. Next, I think the Bebop 2 has pretty durable overall construction, certainly improved from the original, and as long as the camera doesn't get damaged, this thing can take a real beating. Furthermore, with the flight controller, the dynamics and stability of the drone much improves. It's up there with what you would find with other popular drones. And plus with the flight controller, you also have an HDMI out, so you can do stuff like live streaming potentially, and obviously put on a pair of FPV goggles to get that kind of first-person experience. And last but not least, certainly the biggest upgrade of the Bebop 2 has to be the battery performance. The original was pretty terrible at under 10 minutes average flight time. With this, you are getting over 20 minutes of your average flight time, which is excellent. The charge time is also less than 30 minutes. So in terms of power efficiency and overall longer flight times, it's definitely a cool thing to see on this drone. Now moving on to the cons, firstly, we mentioned that the Sky controller is definitely an excellent addition to the drone and certainly makes it a lot more capable and usable, especially for long distance, but there are some caveats. One thing, the whole portability factor kind of gets thrown out the window because the Sky controller itself, although functionally very nice to use, it is kind of a large and unwieldy piece of kit, and it kind of takes away from the portability aspect of the whole platform. Now the next issue I had is with the signal inconsistencies, especially if you're using a smartphone or tablet to communicate with the Bebop 2 using the internal Wi-Fi capabilities. After about 200 meters to about 150 meters, you do get a pretty bad overall signal. The video feed gets sketchy all the time, and after about 300 meters, you've pretty much lost the connection. So it's not very versatile there. With the Sky controller, it promises 2 kilometers worth of range, but ideally you're going to get somewhere in between 1 to 1.5 kilometers, and even with the Sky controller, you do get the occasional hiccups in terms of the video feed, and especially when you're really far away from the drone, you might even lose the signal. So the signal connection itself is kind of sketchy at times, and certainly not as solid and trustworthy as something you would find is like, let's say, the Lightbridge technology you have on the DJI drones. Another huge downside of the Bebop 2 is that you don't have any expandable memory. You're pretty much stuck with 8 gigabytes of internal memory, and 1080p video fills up pretty fast. And I really wish this thing had a micro SD expansion slot. It would make a lot more sense and give this thing a little bit more capabilities. Last but not least, the biggest issue I have with the Bebop 2 is regarding the video quality and the stills quality itself. As a flying camera platform, one of the most important things is a high quality camera. And even though in terms of a functional standpoint, the camera kind of does its job of giving you an aerial perspective free from any major distortions in terms of the fisheye effect itself. So it's pretty good in terms of the software, but the actual video quality is kind of pixelated, pretty unclear, especially when you're looking at large landscapes. All the fine detail is completely lost. And with drones such as the Phantom 3 lineup offering 2.5K at under $500 and even 4K video capturing capabilities at under $800, this is a very competitive landscape where the camera technology needs to be absolutely sensational, and there's not really much improvement from the Bebop 2 coming from the Bebop 1 in terms of actual video quality and stills functionality. So this is probably the biggest factor of why I would say this is probably not the best drone out there. You really want the best kind of perspective and the best video capturing experience to show off to all your friends and your families, and this thing is definitely not going to deliver that kind of quality compared to everything else you can get out there. But really, other than that, guys, that's really it. If you have any specific questions, let me know. We're also going to have a head-to-head comparison between the Bebop 2 and the Phantom 4K. Now, the Bebop 2 also competes against the Phantom 3 standard, so we're going to actually have kind of almost a three-way comparison in that video, but it'll just be a head-to-head showdown between these two flying camera platforms to see which one is best suited towards you and see which one has the better overall features. So definitely stay tuned for that. You might even find that video in the description down below. Give us a thumbs up if you like this review. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you later. Take care.